selling. We're actually going to be mapping out exactly how you could build a world-class business system for your company and how you can sell a lot more of whatever it is you're selling. Look, there's probably two massive skill sets you have to successfully run a business, or have other people that you're relying on those skill sets for, and that's how to market and how to sell. You got to get leads. You got to be able to sell those leads. And if you know and can master selling, well, then you could succeed in almost any profession. And that's exactly what we're going to decode for you today. So Don W. Long is a respected entrepreneur of two businesses that have generated more than $100 million in sales. Now, he has authored several books, including his international sales book, Sell or Don't Eat. Now, Don's cross-disciplinary teaching style is a match of corporate training, conference, panels, and workshops. Now, as an experienced entrepreneur and speaker, Don inspires audiences to seek radical transformation through his direct, reliable, and passionate speaking style. Don, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. And good to be here with you guys.
Yeah, I love this book title, Sell or Don't Eat. So where did you come up with it?
Well, believe it or not, about 5 years ago, I was in the process of putting the last business that I ran on the market. And I had a friend of mine, a close family friend I'd known for probably about 10 years, and he started a business. He's kind of a lighting sound guy. He does like sound for stages and events and stuff like that. And he said, he picked up the phone and called me one day and said, look, I need to know how to get clients. And I'm like, well, let's have coffee. And so what happened, and over the next 6 weeks, we had coffee once a week, and I would just give him some of the tips that I had used over the last 35 years or so. And, about 6 weeks into the process, he comes in the door and he looks like a Christmas tree. He's all lit up, and he's got more clients than he can get to. And he starts telling me, hey, you ought to put this in podcast form or write a book or something. So the book was inspired from me coaching a close friend of mine back in 2017. And so that's kind of where it came from. I took tips that I had learned in the several businesses that I'd run, and it just helped him with his process, and then put a book together for it. That's where the whole idea came from.
Well, that's awesome. I need to do lunch with you. Obviously, that's the first thing. The second thing, one of the things that I found out in your book here is these 3 Ps of developing a sales system. And I find a lot of people that don't have a sales system, they don't know how to develop a sales system. So give us a little bit more insight there on how you do that.
The difference in large companies and smaller ones, and some people want, I coach a lot of different people, and some people are owner operators, and that they just want to have, like, let's say they want to be in the plumbing business and they just want to have them in a truck. And hey, that's fine. That's your goal. But a lot of people want to grow past that into a larger company model. And the only way to do that is to have plans, policies, and procedures. Those are the 3 Ps. And you have to develop them for everything you run in a business. But for me, the beginning of every business is sales. If you do not have sales, you don't have a business. And so I developed my sales systems, obviously, at first. And what ended up happening in the beginning, I put plans together, but I didn't really have procedures and policies because I was the only primary salesman. But as the company grew and we started putting several salespeople in place and teams in place, then I had developed these plans and policies and procedures, and we tested them. And the key to building a system, people listening to this, the difference in a mom and pop operation and an S&P 500 company is simple. It's 3 Ps. That's all it is. They've learned how to take models and put them in plans, then put procedures around them, and then adjust them and change them as time evolves. And if you can do that systematically, then you can build a business from 0 to $100 million over time, depending on how fast you want to go and how much investment you have to put in it. But it still revolves around your systems. I heard a guy back in 2002 make this statement. And from that moment on, I've been on this path of systemization. He said, you have to systematize everything. When he said it, I'm like, I'm not even sure that's a word, but I like the statement. And so I went back to our company at that time and started having meetings with my people, saying they were going to systematize everything. Everything's going to be, we're going to measure it, and then we're going to be able to manage it better. And so that's the key. When you put these 3 Ps together, the key for the listeners is this: be flexible, but also look at it weekly, because you cannot manage something that you can't measure. And so when you're putting these things in, when you're getting the result, then hey, why did we get this result? Start measuring the result. Start seeing which one of your salespeople or which one of the people are closing the most deals, or which one of the things or statements or the things you're using are pulling in the most business. And then, okay, how do we put the gas pedal down on these, but then look at these other areas that are not quite working as well and work on those. And so I'm a big believer in working on the business every week. And if you're a small business with just 3 or 4 people, then it's probably an hour of your time a week. As I got bigger toward the end of the last company I sold, I had approximately 13 impact areas. And each one of those impact areas, I attempted to spend every week an hour in each one of those, and then meeting with the different teams and people that put those together. And in doing that, we were always getting better a little bit at a time.
A lot of powerful things that you just said there. So when we talk about this, like policies, processes, procedures. So how do you do this? Do you do it as you're actually implementing? So let me say, for example, if I have a sales team, will you give me an example? Like if I'm building a sales team, what are some of the first steps that I want to take to build a sales process? And then what am I doing to basically systemize this? What kind of procedures, what kind of policies? What does that look like if I'm building this out, for example, from the beginning?
Okay. All right. So from the beginning, basically, if you have a sales team, you already have some things that are working. But let's just take it down to you're starting by yourself and you've learned how to sell, and now you're bringing other people into the business. Let's go from there. So for me, what I ended up doing is taking at the time, it was only one sheet of paper, all the things that I was doing that was working, that was causing me to close 40% of the people I got in front of, which is a high number in any industry. And so I took the few things that I was doing and I tried to think through those and write just on a white piece of paper those things. It was 4 or 5 of them. And as I brought people into that, here's what happened when I brought the first few salespeople. I realized that they had more of the answers than I did if I would just ask the right questions. So building systems has to do with when you bring people into your team, so to speak, give them the things that you know that work because you're the leader, but then also then open the floor up for discussion and let them bring what they see as answers to bringing in more sales, whatever it is the meeting's about. We're just assuming it's around sales teams right now. And so you will find that they will have little tidbits of information because typically they're out in the field meeting your clients and talking to them. So they will have actually their own experiences. Well, this didn't work, or this seems to be the hot button right now, or this, whatever it is, and then take that thing, whatever that thing is, write it down and create a kind of a procedure around it so that the other salespeople say, hey, these are the things that we know are working right now or that are not working. And why is this not working and bringing the result we want to? And then push the gas on the ones that are working. You'll always have things you're tweaking. And I think that's probably the thing I want people to understand in developing systems. Don't get caught up in you've got to have 10 pages on everything on the 3 Ps. Just start with the few items that if you're the owner operator and you're starting to bring people in, that the things that have worked for you, start there. That's your plan, policy, and procedure. And then from there, expand it as you bring people onto your team. Because I'll tell you what happened to me. This is a good example. A lot of times you will bring people into your team that end up being superstars, which is so awesome. When you hire one of these superstars, they are actually better at it than you. That's what every owner operator wants. They fear it a little bit, but when you bring people in, the goal to building a great business is what Steve Jobs said. Why he made the statement, he said, why would I hire the smartest people in the universe and then tell them how to do their job? I'm like, you bring people in and you look for these people. Well, when you find them, and this is what happened to me, I found one and we started building the procedures and plans around this person because they were outperforming everyone. And all I did would bring them in the meeting and I would say, okay, what's going on? How are you doing this? How did this work with the client? And we would take the little tidbits that we knew that we could measure, and then we would we'd start documenting them. And I would always have my HR person in the meeting. At that time, I had one. who was really organization on steroids. So she was very well, she would write the high points, but she would know how to organize the procedures so that as we brought new people in, we were able to explain it to them.
Yeah, a lot of great meat on that bone per se, and very true. Like I have a 20-person sales team, and in the beginning, everybody was doing whatever they wanted. They were saying their own thing, and then when, just like you said, we brought them all into one room, and we said, "Hey, well, at that time we had a fraction of that," and said, "What are you saying that's effective?" And then what some would be like, "I would say this," and the others would be like, "Ooh, that's good stuff. I didn't know about that." And then other ones, they'd be like, "Yeah, I do the same thing. I do the same thing. I do the same thing." And it was really interesting because we were able to build our sales process, as you described, with the best of stuff that we already knew worked from everybody there. But what I find is some people, like I like to do what you do, like what you described. I'll do it myself and figure out how it is, and then build a basic process around that. But what about the people that suck at sales or they're afraid of sales? That's a natural skill set for me. But there are other people out in this world that they're afraid to even do the first selling. They may be trying to hire the first salesperson to do the selling before they even test what's going on. So can that be done? And is it the same thing to bring somebody in and let them go at it to see what works and then model a system around what they find?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I've got this audio set that I did on, it's called the Sales Blueprint. And I believe that everyone has a way they sell. Okay. And I use the DISC model. Most people are familiar with the DISC model. It's a personality profile test. I use that because I use that in all the companies that I ran to hire the people. So what you really want to do, like if you're going to, let's say that you are a C in the DISC model, and that's more of an engineer type. That's more of an analytical, low-key, slower talking person. He's definitely not talking as fast as you are, and so that's a different type of thing. So I have a friend that's a C, and the guy that actually first person I coached about 5 or 6 years ago, he's probably in that C quadrant. And so they are typically not what you would call a classical salesperson. Okay, that particular initial, but it depends on what you're selling too. So the friend that I have that's a C is in the pharmaceutical industry. So he deals with doctors and people who think like that. So he's great at what he does and great at marketing and sales because he's talking to people like him. So what I do is, like, for instance, if you are a person who don't like sales, but you want to start a company and you've got a great idea, my recommendation is always find someone that's great at it and build systems around them. You've got to have some parameters in there, but there's a prototypical sales type in the DISC model. And when we hired people at the management level at the last company I ran, they were required to take a DISC before I hired them, depending on the job that they were applying for, because I had learned how to take the different elements of the DISC and look for the appropriate personality for that job. Because in the beginning, I'm just like you. I just hire people and hope they do a good job, and I'll try to train them the best I can. That's the way most businesses start. But as you get bigger, you have to look for the type of person to slip into that spot. Because if you don't, like for instance, if I hired a D, which is a dominant personality, and I put them in my HR staff at the top, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. The lady that I had who ran the last company, she was the vice president of HR. She was a high S, which is perfect for the HR. And some of the people listening might not understand the DISC, but you could take a simple DISC test. It's pretty simple, and it's easy to understand after you do. But for me, to answer your initial question, if I'm somebody who hates sales, I'm probably never going to be good at it, number one. So why would I try to sell? Now, in the beginning, all owners have to sell at some level, but eventually, or soon, if you're a C and you need a DI to sell your product, you need to hire somebody as soon as you can. And then as you do, build systems. That's why you have to have the weekly meeting. See, I'm a big on the weekly meeting, and it not being some sort of political thing or BS thing. It's a time where you drill down and you figure it out, and you take notes on it, and you build around that. So when the beginning, if you're a C and you have to hire somebody that's a DI, you've got to have those meetings every week to see what's working and be able to manage it.
Yeah, and great. I mean, great points there. There's so much to that. And one of the things you mentioned was HR. So do you find that you use the 3 Ps in the HR process too, as well, in the involvement of finding the right people?
Oh, absolutely. So The cool thing about hiring superstars, let me go back to that, because the HR VP that I had at the last business, I hired her a decade prior to her fulfilling her job, and she worked her way into that job. And she actually became what I consider a superstar in the HR department. So what happened is the three P's are going to apply to every piece of system you have. We're talking about sales primarily here because that's probably what most people are interested in. But you've got to develop these policies and plans and procedures around HR, around leadership, around communication, around training, around all the things that you consider as impact areas in your business. But what ended up, she was so in tune with that. She was better at it than me. So I let her, she sat in most of our meetings, even if she wasn't involved in that process, because I had her take notes and define those things so we could apply them in each department. And when, you know, it's like HR is going to be small if you're a beginning business, but the bigger you get, it gets to be a bigger thing. And you need to have a great HR piece in there, a person or team or whatever, to help you manage the influx of people coming in and out of your business.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. And one of the things that you pointed out that I think is really essential is not only just finding the right people, but finding people that offset your weaknesses. When we talk about if you suck at sales, we'll get somebody else to come in. You mentioned the same thing. You're like, hey, when I found this right person, the thing took off. I'm the same way. Like I built businesses before, even to 7-figure level, but you know, to get to 8 figures, I needed somebody to come in like my partner, and she is just completely strong in all the areas I'm weak and vice versa. And I just think that's so powerful. Like if you could do that and recognize your weaknesses and strengths and go all in on your strengths and then hire to offset the weaknesses, it seems to be that formula is just really powerful to be able to build, you know, 8-9 figure businesses.
Yeah. So that's why I use the DISC test. If you're, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you're just starting now, and you don't know your strengths, just go take a simple DISC test online. And what you'll find is it gives you your strengths. It also gives you your weaknesses, and it gives you your primary, typically your primary in one block and secondary in another. And it's a color charted thing, so it's easy to see. What happens from there is then you know who you are. See, if one of the things that I work with when I coach people is I work on this thing that's more psychological than it is prototypical, like you would see systems. I work on that piece first because the identity piece of who you are is the most important piece. Because if you don't know who you are and you don't know what you bring to the table, you don't know how to, number one, hire different people than you are so that it fulfills those gaps that you're weak in. And then also work on your strengths. And that's the only thing that I want people to work on when I hire. And that's why I hire according to the DISC profile. I'm interested. John Maxwell makes a statement. I'll just give it to you this way. He said, when you are a 5 at something, you can only grow 2 slots in what all his studies in leadership. So people can only grow 2 slots on a 0 to 10 scale. If you're a 5, the best you'll ever be is a 7 in whatever that is. Okay. But if you are a 7 at something, then you can grow into a 9. He said people will stand in line for 9s. And what I found is that using the simple DISC test, I can pull the strengths out of people. And my teams, I wanted them to work only on their strengths, not on their weaknesses. That's why you hire people to fill those gaps that I was weak organizationally. I could put a plan together, but as far as the HR piece and being as organized as the VP that I had, I was like second class compared to her. And it's like, you know, so when I got her and I started realizing this from hiring her, I started like, wait a minute, this is how successful businesses are run. They find the leader and the owner or the founder finds the things they're good at, works on those things only, and then finds the other people who needs to work on the other things that he's no good at. And look, I can give your listeners an easy litmus test to find out what you're not good at. You don't even have to take the DISC test. If you hate it, you suck at it, you're not even good at it. Period. You don't have a strength for it. The passion inside of you. See, when I talk to you, I know you're good at sales because of the way you're talking. You're just like, wow, this is good. But that passion is where you know your strengths flow from. So when you're dispassionate about a subject and you hate doing it, I hated doing filing and HR. So I knew I wasn't any good at it. It's that simple. And if the people listening to this will just take that one thing, if you just want one thing today, if you can take the things, when you hate it, you suck at it. and you're not going to be good at it. If you love it or have a passion for it, you have the possibility of being great at it.
In your teachings, you teach a lot of things, and some of the things, beyond some of what we just scratched the surface of uncovering your identity is tapping in and finding lasting wealth, which really has to do with retention. And that's the other problem. You could sell the daylights at everybody, right? But if you don't retain them and make them happy customers that refer more and pay you more and increase the lifetime value, then everybody I mean, so many people fail here. They're so obsessed with getting new people in the door that they're just really bad at keeping the people that they have happy and getting more referrals and increasing the lifetime value. How do we apply the 3 Ps to be able to have better retention, to be able to create more wealth, because we have more customers that are happy, that refer more people? And how do we do that for the retention piece?
Yeah, that's a big point, because most, as you well know, it takes a lot more energy to go get a new client than it does to keep a client that you already have. Sometimes it's 3 to 1, 5 to 1, depending on the particular industry you're in. So we had in my sales in the world-class business system, I have one module on retaining clients, and that was an hour. I considered that an impact area, and so that was something I talked about weekly with our guys. And the metaphor that we developed was creating a lifetime clients that no one can ever steal. And I'd like to tell you, we were successful at that. And we were, for the most part, we were probably 80, 90% successful, because what we did is we started building policies around, okay, how do we retain clients? What are the things that cause them to leave when they leave? And we started asking the serious questions. Okay. And then we found, and you'll find in most industries, is there's probably 2 or 3 things that are always really obvious of why clients leave. One of the things is a lack of personal touch, a lack of interaction with your clients ongoing once you get the contract. And it's different for each client. This is why the DISC model is so important. If I have a list of clients, and we kept our list, we had a hot, cold, and warm list, and the people who were our current clients were always on the hot list, and we were trying to figure out how to interact with them at a personal level continually, so that we didn't become a number or a contract, but we became a person to them, a human. And building that personal connection, this is something that's gone back 100 years, 1,000 years. The greatest way to get a client and to keep a client is personal connection. That is a top piece. That's when I'm looking you in the eye. And now with the technology we're having this conversation on Zoom. It's like I can actually connect with clients anywhere and be able to look at them and talk to them. And so that is what we were always drilling down on. There were always things that people left for. There was always a money issue, with contracts and stuff. Sometimes people think they get a better deal down the street, so on and so forth. So we tried to build bridges around that to eliminate that by staying in our constant contact, but not where it was just burdensome to people, like, just sending them stuff and just trying to stay on their grid all the time. After we had the contract. And what I found is that most people do exactly what you said. We turn and burn. We just, we're good at sales. Maybe we go get all the clients we want to get, but they go out the back door as fast as they come in the front door. And if you don't build the quickest thing for me, or the one thing I could leave for the people listening, is if you can develop a way to have personal touch with each one of your clients after you have them as a client, you will stand a greater chance of them not going out the back door. And that's going to be different for each person. We did little white paper educational things. We did lunch and learns. We did little pithy emails. We didn't send people emails all the time that burn them out, because too many people get too many emails, right? But we did enough of it to let them know we're thinking about you. And we would make notes. Like, for instance, if you were my client, I would know that your kids played soccer. If they do, if they don't, but let's just say they do. I would know, I would try to find out, hopefully, some personal things about you. And when we had conversations, or I would send you a quick email, I would always put that in there. So I would build my list around these hot clients, people you have contracts with, and I would make notes on them, each individual. And this was, my salespeople had to do this, and they had to keep up on the spreadsheet. And then that way, when they contacted their clients ongoing, they always had some form of personal connection that drew them into being human. Because the moment I become a number to you, you can throw me out the door pretty easy. If I'm a friend, if I'm the expert you hired to help you, and I have this personal connection, it's going to be really hard for you to disconnect with me.
You mentioned earlier, Don, that about working on the business and making time to do that. So how do you do that? How do you approach strategic planning, visionary thought of really setting the direction of what you want the business to be and not get caught in the weeds of working in it?
Yeah, that's really a great question. In the beginning, if you're starting by yourself, you should take 1 hour every week and just come up with these plans, policies, and procedures that you can see that would be applying to your company. Whatever it is, maybe they're not effective yet because you don't have the teams to put them in place, but you should start thinking through, and you should take time. It's just, in the beginning, it's simple because it's only 1 hour. Just take 1 hour of your time a week, pull out a pad, or if you do your stuff on your computer, that's fine, and start thinking through the sales process. Start thinking through HR, start thinking through leadership and what that should look like, and communication and what that should look like in your company, the different areas that what I've considered the impact start coming up. When you start a business, there's usually only 3 to 5 impact areas. As you grow the business, like I said, when I got to the end of the last company that I ran, it was probably more like 12 to 13 impact areas. And I would attempt to take an hour on each one each week, but at least 30 minutes on each one to try to think through. And this was something I would do either by myself or with my teams in those areas. Some of them had a team element to them, so I would spend time with them and run the ideas by them and get them to give me insight in things they thought, that we need to tweak. And so this is so important, because the difference between most companies that get large and companies who stay small is working on the business. And you have got to do that if you want it to get larger, because that's the only way to create these areas. Because it's so easy, like you said, you get caught in the weeds, you're just pulled into the reactionary mode every day, every week. And then you never get any of this planning stuff done so you can actually build the processes bigger. And it's the easy thing about it being in the beginning is that it only takes an hour of your time. Because let me tell you, if you can't do it now and you're starting a business, you won't ever do it when you get a bigger business, because you're going to be pulled from 10 different directions.
Don, powerful stuff today. We've just really scratched the surface on some of the topics you cover in your book and some of what you do to help your clients. But everybody listening and watching that wants to learn more, what action should they take? Where should they go?
Well, they can visit my website. It's got all material, and it's www.donwlong.com. And I have an email contact. You can contact me if you'd like further information that's not on the website, and you can just check it out and see if any of the stuff that I have can help you. I spend a lot of time. I spend time coaching individual people, but I also spend time coaching some teams in some of these S&P 500 companies. Because what I found out is that a lot of these S&P 500 companies have all the plans and policies and procedures written, but they don't do them. So it's like, okay, all right, so give me your VP of sales and their team, and give me your locations across the United States or wherever you're at, and let's have some meetings, and let's see if I can hold your feet to the fire to actually live by the plans and procedures that y'all have paid tens and maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars developing. So that's it. That's always fun to do that when you get to the high level and you realize, well, what's your policy and procedure on that? And they're like, well, I'm sure we have one. And I'm like, okay, what is it? Because it's a lot of times bringing someone, bringing someone into your business, they can see things that you can't see because you're in the weeds most of the time. And they're like, well, have you thought about this? And you're like, oh yeah, I actually have that wrote down somewhere. Just go do the obvious things. That's the last thing I would leave with the audience is go do the obvious things it takes to build the business, and then figure out the things that you need to put in place to keep growing it.
Don, great stuff. Thanks again for joining us today.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it.
So listen, Don, we just really scratched the surface of what Don could cover with you. I mean, really, it all comes down. We never even talked about getting leads in the door. We just got a chance to scratch the surface on some sales techniques and using the 3 Ps, and also retention, some of the aspects of hiring. But there's so much more. So what you should do next is go to donwlong.com. That's donwlong.com. And on Don's website, there's a ton of great information. You can talk to him about speaking. There's coaching information on there. There's information about products that he offers. And there's also free video training as well as other resources there as well. So again, dive in deeper, because if you get this figured out, if you can effectively sell, I truly believe that you could build, if you've got a legit product that helps people, right? And it's not a scam or anything like that. It's legit, which I imagine if you're watching this, you have a legitimate product or a legitimate concept. If you have that and you can sell, I have no doubts you could build a 7-figure plus business, but you've got to get some of those fundamentals down. And just by going to donwlong.com, you're already well on your way of establishing and building those fundamentals, and also the processes, the procedures that you need to be able to scale to a 7-8-figure business. So if you want to grow, if you want to be more successful, you got to get the fundamentals, and you got to get the processes, the procedures, the policies, everything that you need to be able to scale accordingly. And all of that, the first step is just go to donwlong.com. So make sure you go to donwlong.com to be on your journey of building a very successful business. And again, building a world-class business system. Thanks again for tuning in.